And now it's time for Mob Talk Radio with your host, Jeff Canarsie.
Yo, Lord Willin, Jeff Canarsie, Mob Talk Radio. Check it out. Yo, we stay quiet like Russell Buffalino when things will get ugly like Pepsi's death in Casino. Who do we know? No one, nobody. But we're all well respected like Della Croce and Gotti. I know wild nights, Havana nocturne. Light up a cigar and watch your spot burn. You'll get patty whacked, I'm tough like Irish dock workers. Run with guys who got guys, hooligans and block lurkers. Corner berserkers, street savvy soldiers. You owe, you better pay. Don't make me say I told you. Code you don't betray, I say what I mean. Providence and Brooklyn all the way to the Bean. I'd rather be unseen, like Vinny the Chin. I don't gotta go to Vegas to see cities of sin. Pull the pin, drop bombs like Danny Green. I write homicide like the murder machine. Lansky Luciano, mastermind the racket. Up in the clam house with a milli in my jacket. Move around when the streets get darker. Pay homage to real bosses like Gambino and Patriarcha. Mob talking, but you don't talk to the mob. Lord Will and Jeff Canarsie, we stay on our job. This is Mob Talk, straight from the streets. Mob Talk, the life over beats. Lord Will and Jeff Canarsie, bringing you the real. Kill all rats, you already know the deal. This is Mob Talk, straight from the streets. Mob Talk, the life over beats. Lord Will and Jeff Canarsie, bringing you the real. Kill all rats, you already know the deal.
And welcome to Mob Talk Radio. I am your host, Jeff Canarsie. We, obviously a day later this week, but it's been a busy week. We got some news and notes to get to. We've got a Q&A to get to, and we also have the main topic for today, which is Tony Salerno. I thought I had done him before, but I think because over on our blog, I've done so many articles about him, I sort of got confused about the whole thing. Anyway, you can follow us on Twitter at RealMobTalk7. Check us out on Facebook at Mob Talk Radio. Give us a like, give us a subscribe, send your hate mail. God knows we're getting plenty of it these days. But what I wanted to do before we get into the Q&A is I wanted to talk about the Joey Merlino trial. There's a lot I could say about it. And listen, I don't want to get on a rabbit trail about it. I think we've digested it for 6 months. I don't think there's much to say other than I think there are a couple things that are important. First of all, the media is a bunch of lying bastard pricks. They reported that there was some sort of chaos in the courtroom. There was no chaos. There was an incident, but it wasn't. It was made out to be bigger than it really was in the media. Obviously, the Daily News covered that portion of it. I never heard the word rat bastard get used once. I was sitting very close to where this was allegedly said, and I can tell you that's not what I heard. Maybe I'm deaf, and maybe it was said, but I swear to God I never heard it. But in any event, it was really made out to be something more than it wasn't, and yes, I'm the schmuck who was the one screaming at reporters on the steps. I don't like them, and here's the thing. When I say you're vultures and you need to get a real job, of course I understand that being a reporter is a job. The problem that I have is these are the same fucking people that reported salacious shit that mob rat John Rubio said. Like stuff that it wasn't even fucking true to begin with, and just stuff that was just really grimy and soap opera-like, and just these are the same fucking people that said on the whole left side of the trial were goons, mob goons, and it's like it's all bullshit and it's drama, and they got to sell papers, I get it, but they're goons, they're liars. And they don't tell the truth. And I just fucking had it. After like 3.5 months of this bullshit with them, I had it and I said what I needed to say. Of course, my little peckerhead friend Dave Ratweiser didn't show up. I didn't think he would. And I knew the gremlin, George Anesthesia, wouldn't show up. I just kind of figured that would be the case. But in any event, this is where we're at. Joey Merlino gets 24 months in federal prison. He has 45 days to, I guess, collect his vacation bags. And get his college papers ready. And from what I understand, he may report to Butner, North Carolina, which, you know, Carmine Persico's there. Bernie Madoff is there. There's some other guys there that I know of. It's not a horrible place, not the best place either, but then again, it's fucking prison. It's not supposed to be a fucking romper room. Now, let's talk about what I think is fair. I think one of the interesting things that Judge Sullivan did say is that he did not believe that Joey Merlino was the boss of any mafia. He did not believe that Joey Merlino was the ringleader in any fraud. So what I find tongue-in-cheek about all of that is you say that shit and then you give him the max for gambling. Now, the argument Sullivan makes in court is that, Mr. Merlino, had you been found guilty of this and not taken a deal, I would have given you 7 years, 5 years, whatever it fucking was. Still doesn't make sense to me. And this is going to be my point. And nobody's going to agree with me. And, I'm getting all the messages of you defend alleged mobsters, you're going to hell. So fucking be it. I'll go to hell. I have no problem with that. I think since the day I was born, I was on a fucking trajectory to hell. I got no beef with that. So the point I'm going to make to you is this. It's gambling. It's fucking gambling. I don't think that Judge Sullivan necessarily believed that John Rubio was telling the truth about a whole lot. But then again, what is Joey convicted largely of? And yes, he did plead guilty, but the point is that this all happened as a result of a snitch and a rat and a junkie, a lowlife, a creep. And so here's the point, is that the Division of Probation and Parole called for 10 months. The government wanted 2 years because they talked about a plethora of crimes he was actually acquitted of. What I don't understand, in the way it's been explained to me by my attorney, is that it's like the Fatico rule. Federal court can use your past, even acquittals, against you, which to me seems a little prejudicial, to be honest with you. I think it's a fucking joke. Alleging that Joey Merlino either took part, knew of, or was around 5 murders or whatever the fuck the nonsense was that they said in court really is null and void. If you're acquitted of murder charges, why are they being brought up? If you're acquitted, means the jury found no fucking reason to even believe for a second you had anything to do with what the bullshit government fucking is suggesting. If that's the case, why can you use that in federal court against somebody? It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. They didn't do that with Rubio or fucking Wayne Kreisberg or Greg Scarpa or any of these other fucking rats that do this shit. They don't use those past allegations against them. No. So is 2 years fair? Considering what he could have gotten, absolutely. I don't think it's like a huge egregious thing where we need to grab pitchforks and run up to the fucking Manhattan and start burning the fucking place down. But at the same time, if you're going to publicly state you don't believe that somebody was actively involved in this and you don't believe somebody was the head of that, that was the crux of the whole fucking government's case. So if you come out publicly and say you don't believe it, then how in the fuck can you rightfully goddamn allow somebody to take a fucking guilty plea for some bullshit? It doesn't make sense to me. It never fucking will. And of course, this whole trial was a joke. You've even got that piece of shit scumbag, AIDS-looking flea bag, fucking John Rubio running all over social media, glorifying putting 47 people away or whatever the fuck it is because he's a scumbag. But he does this from the protection of the WITSEC program. Believe me, he's not out on the streets talking shit to anybody. He's doing it cloak and dagger behind the guise of the FBI, because if you say anything to a piece of shit like that, he's going to run and tell, and then everybody gets charges for intimidating a federal informant. That's just the way it works. That's why I don't respond to him. That's why I do it this way. Rubio, you're a piece of shit, scumbag, fucking nothing. You're a joke. Nobody likes you. And you can brag about your 47 people you put away, but guess what? I wouldn't want to have your fucking luck. Because for every 47 people you put away, there's 200 that are looking for you. And that's a stupid fucking way to live. You're a rat, you're a nothing, you're a creep, and shut the fuck up already. Now, that being said, that's it for the rant. Joey's going to serve, probably 18 months. And it's the reality of the situation. Do I think it's fair? No. Do I like it? No, I think it's bullshit. I think that without getting into details, I think that there are some health concerns that Joey Merlino has. And I know what the fucking purists are going to say. They're going to say, well, if you've got health issues, you shouldn't be breaking the law. We're talking gambling here. 99.9% of every fucking American gambles. You gamble every day you put your fucking left foot in before your right. You gamble every day you walk out your front door. You don't know if you're going to get hit by a fucking bus. How many of you sit in the fucking office pool? Or you go to the bar and you play in the fucking football pool? Get the fuck out of here. It's gambling. $2,500 gets you 2 years in prison. Meanwhile, majority of the United States is allowing gambling, sportsbook gambling specifically. You look at all of these fucking offshore gambling establishments, GoDaddy. I mean, all this crazy shit that they got now. I don't fuck with any of it. But it's just ridiculous. If you're going to allow these corporations to do this, what is the fucking difference between a corporation taking a bet and Jim Bob on the corner calling up saying, "Give me 5 points on the fucking Lakers and here's 1,000," or whatever it is? What's the fucking illegality of that? The illegality of it is the government wants a kickback, and this is the only way that they could have gotten Joey Merlino. That's the fucking truth. So it is what it is. I don't like the sentence. I think honestly, I think Joey should have been, even if you're going to give him 18, let's say he's going to do 18 months, give him 9 a house arrest, give him 9 in prison, call it a fucking day with a fine and leave it alone. But I need to say this about Mr. Jacobs, Merlino's attorney. Not only is he a terrific attorney, he really is. He made a lot of great arguments in sentencing. 85% of those convicted in this what they call the East Coast Enterprise bullshit, 85% of those that either the majority took pleas of gambling didn't get what Joey got. Sullivan makes the argument that, well, they didn't have the background Merlino had. Bullshit. So once again, we just sort of see that when you look at the tipping scale, it's not fair. It wasn't designed the same way. He wasn't treated the same way. And I think that deep down, Joey knew that was probably going to be the result. I think you'd be a fool to think it was going to end any other way, especially when you have a name like Joey, especially when you're visible like Joey. The media does what they do. They chase him. So all that being said, that's where we're at with that. Hopefully this is the end of it. Hopefully he can do his time and then go back to Florida and hang out on the boat, smoke his cigarettes, do whatever. But the idea that this system, and it's a bigger problem that I'm not going to get into today, but the government has got to stop rewarding people for telling on people. And I know what people are going to say to me. They're going to say, well, if you don't allow people to testify against people, they're never going to solve crimes. Whatever happened to making a cop do his fucking job? I'm not saying nothing disparaging about the police. I'm saying if their job is to arrest you and a criminal's job is to break the law, why are you going to give the cops all this extra help? Let them do their fucking job. This is what they go to school for. This is what they do. Make them do their fucking jobs. Instead, what happens is they get every unreliable fucking skeleton, junkie, crackhead piece of shit they can find to lie and to make up shit. And in Rubio's case, I mean, it's ridiculous. If you sat there like I did, you see the evidence. Rubio lied from beginning to end and everywhere and in every fucking where and in between. And he wants to fucking send me messages and threaten me and say all this stupid shit. Hey, if you put 47 people away and you're content with what you did, what the fuck you need to fucking come at me for? How come one guy who says you're a rat and a bottom feeder and a fucking junkie and a liar, why do I bother you so much? You know why? Because you can't live with yourself because of what you are. Because you know you lied, you know you're a rat, you know you're a junkie. At some point, we've got to stop relying on this tattletale system. Let the cops do their jobs. Let the criminals do their jobs. Let the cops solve the cases. Let the lawyers defend. That's the way that this country should be. How we became a country of rats, snitches, informants, tattletales, and fucking jerk-offs is beyond my understanding. I don't like it. I never have. But that's the reality of the way the government works. And that's where we're at. So that's pretty much what happened at the Joey Merlino trial. Like I said, I was sitting there. I didn't hear rat bastard. I didn't hear any of that crap. This is, once again, the media spinning it the way they want. But the only thing they did get right is me screaming at them on the steps, which you guys can have your own opinion about that. I just don't like my friends being harassed. It's ridiculous. It's like, I can't put words to it. Anyway, that being said, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get to your Q&A, and then we're going to get to Tony Salerno. So stay tuned on Mob Talk Radio. In my travels, I'm always looking for a clothing brand that I feel like represents me. Anybody can go to a store and buy a t-shirt with a gimmick. But if you believe in 3 core values like I do, loyalty, honor, and respect, then look no further than Omerta Brand Clothing. You can catch them at omertamia.com, MIA.com, with locations in Europe, California, Boston, Brooklyn, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Washington. They have a great clothing line with hats, shirts, sweatshirts, keychains, anything you might need, stickers. You want the rats to stop snitching? Go right out and get yourself a sticker. But if you want to live your life by the gentleman's code, look no further than Omerta brand clothing. And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. If you're listening to the show, you're probably wondering why I'm like a day and a half late. A lot of it is just with the stuff with the Flanagans. There's a lot of stuff going on with that, a lot of screenwriting, script editing stuff going on. There's just a lot of things that are going on right now for me that I'm doing outside of the show. So it's been sort of a pain in the ass, to say the least. Anyway, all that being said, we didn't get a ton of questions this week, and I don't know if that's just because a lot of questions have been recycled or what the case may be. But in any event, we're going to cover a couple of questions, and then we're going to get to the main topic of the show, which is Tony Salerno, which I have not done before. Now, what we do have coming next week is I'm going to cover the Mafia cops, Louis Ippolito and Steven Caracappa, along with a little gas pipe stuff. We've covered gas pipe before, so some of it's going to be regurgitated, but we're going to focus mainly on the Mafia cops itself. So all that being said, let's get to the Q&A. Like I said, there's not a lot of questions, so I'm going to get through them, not as quickly as I can, but enough to answer them, and then we're going to get to the main show. So it's probably going to be a much smaller show than you're used to. It's just the reality of things sometimes. Okay, number one. How much of the numbers game did the mob give to Jose Battle, a leader of the Cuban Mafia? Did they lose money? There's no real certain way to answer this sort of very simply as a 1, 2, 3. If you don't know who Jose Battle is, he really got his start as a member of Batista's police force in Cuba. He also helped the CIA to train Cuban exiles to kill Castro, and he even took part in the Bay of Pigs invasion. He would ultimately end up settling in Union City, New Jersey. He would begin sort of taking over Cuban organized crime groups who participated in loan shark and extortion, gamble, and drug trafficking and murder for hire. He ended up establishing deep roots within the Italian mafia, but he would also fight with them and war with them over turf as well. He would end up taking over the Bolita network, which is basically the Hispanic version of the numbers racket. Now, we've talked about Bolita before because that's one of the big things that Santo Traficante was involved in down in Florida. Battle also makes big inroads into Florida as well, but you have to understand, I think there's going to be a disconnect with this topic. And the reason why I say that is because you're going to have some that are going to believe that he told the mob what to do and he just ran amok and did what he wanted. That's not true. Majority of the money that he made, there were huge kickbacks going back. They didn't like each other, but business was business. He hovered between New Jersey, New York, and Florida, and it's estimated, I don't believe this, but it's estimated that he made $45 million a year just in the Bolita market itself. I have a hard time believing he made that much. There's going to be some other bits to this, which I don't believe, but from what I understand, he was kicking back 20% to Traficante in Florida and another 25% to the New York families, which sort of makes that $45 million number a bit of a leap, to say the least. He would end up expanding his Bolita business into Harlem and into the Bronx. It's alleged that he had 2,500 members in his criminal organization, which I absolutely unequivocally don't believe. There's going to be those that are going to say that's true. I particularly don't believe that. And here's the reason why I don't. If you have 25, let's say, made guys in your organization, you could pretty much rival any mob family. You could probably take on the entire mafia in New York City, because I don't think 2,500 people is a crap load of people, and I just don't buy it. And I also think when you have a alleged faction number like 2,500, you're not really going to give a shit what the mob says. You're kind of going to do what you want because you have the strength in numbers to kind of refute whatever they want. So I really don't believe it. I think that's overhyped and overstated. He would actually expand into Florida, into Miami specifically, and then he would actually move the base of his empire to Little Havana. Moving ahead a couple of years later, after members were killed and indicted, he would flee to Lima, Peru, where he would eventually be arrested. In 2004, he and 21 others were arrested, charged with 5 murders, 4 arson attacks, which resulted in 8 deaths, and more than $1.5 billion was collected, allegedly, finances from trafficking, bookmaking, and the Bolita rackets. Now, take that all in totaled. First of all, he is kicking back to the mob 25% in New York, 20% in Florida. So, it's, take it as you want. But if you have 2,500 members and you're making $1.5 billion, I find it very hard to believe you're not kicking back to somebody. Because let me tell you, if there was a turf war, there would have been a lot of murders and a lot of this stuff going on. I just have a hard time buying that this guy was as big as people say he was. I'm not saying he was small, but he wasn't Don Corleone either, as far as I'm concerned. The group that he was associated with and ran was called the Corporation, and Battle would end up dying in 2007. So to answer the question, did the Mafia lose money because of Battle? I don't think so. Trafficante had Florida locked down. It was his territory. You also got to look at the time period when this took place as well. 80s, 90s might have been a little different. I think that's probably where Battle got the majority of his money from during that time period, especially with the cocaine influence coming into Miami and the cocaine cowboys and all this crazy shit that happened. But the idea to me that they had 2,500 members, he was making $50 million a year in the Bolita racket, $1.5 billion trafficking, I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it. That's just me. You may disagree, and I'm sure a lot of people will. And that's just sort of that. Okay. Do you think Nino Gaggi, Roy DeMeo green-lighted the hit on Ruby Stein, or did Jimmy Coonan just kill him rather than pay him back what he owed him? So to kind of understand who Ruby Stein is, Ruby Stein was one of the biggest loan sharks in mob history. At one point, it's estimated he had millions on the streets. So much so, Tony Salerno and others would take their money and put it in Ruby Stein's hands for him to Shylock it out and to loan shark it out. That's how good he was at that racket. But there was other issues other than just the question itself. Mickey Spillane and Jimmy Coonan were warring for turf. Jimmy Coonan wanted to take over, and he just started to begin executing and planning the execution of Spillane's crew. Ruby Stein actually hired Jimmy Coonan to protect him because he was worried about Mickey Spillane. And everything is going pretty much okay until Spillane gets killed. At that point, Jimmy Coonan and the Westies, throughout time, had been borrowing a lot of money from Ruby Stein, and they didn't really feel obligated to pay it back. And so the simple thing for them to do is to just fucking kill him. But that's not the reason why. Because the question, let me repeat the question. Do you think Nino Gaggi and Roy DeMeo greenlit the hit on Ruby Stein, or did Coonan just kill him rather than pay him back what he owed him? This was a twofold thing. The first thing is they killed Ruby Stein because they didn't want to pay him back. Jimmy Coonan didn't feel like he had to. He also had protection of the Gambino crime family, but there is a bigger thing in this. They end up luring Stein to the 596 Club, which was owned by one of the Westies, and he gets shot to death. They end up dismembering him, but they don't pop his lungs. The body floats up, causes all kinds of problems. But the real reason behind the murder really necessarily wasn't the repayment issue. It had more to do with Ruby Stein had a black book that Roy DeMeo and the Gambinos wanted. If he's got $1 million in money on the street, if they can get control of that book, they can take over all the customers, and they can make a shitload of money. That's really what this murder was about. Ruby Stein wasn't going to have the power to take out people, especially when you look at Jimmy Coonan being protected by the Gambino crime family, Roy DeMeo and Castellano, et cetera, et cetera. This really came down to the black book. That's why he was killed. So to say that it was greenlit, I think that's a safe assumption to say. We can probably agree that that's probably what happened. I don't think it was orchestrated by Jimmy Coonan, but I think Jimmy Coonan, one, had a vested interest to get Ruby Stein the fuck out of the way so he didn't have to pay him back. But the bigger issue is that with Mickey Spillane gone, Jimmy Coonan taken over, now the Gambinos are going to be in business with them. This black book was sort of like the holy grail of what they were really looking to attain. So that's the best way that I can answer that. Okay. How was Gotti allowed to turn down the Roy DeMeo hit? Any repercussions? This is a question I get a lot, and I don't understand where this information comes from. Who said John Gotti got who said that John Gotti got the murder hit? I don't know where people are reading this. I don't know if people are seeing this in movies. It's not true. And let me tell you why it's not true. This was a Nino Gaggi problem. Roy DeMeo, for a lot of different reasons, we've discussed a lot of the reasons. You've got the the butchering that went on at the Gemini Lounge. You've got Chris Rosenberg and the Cuban issue, which caused problems. Roy DeMeo just held out for the longest time, not killing Chris Rosenberg because of it when he was ordered to do it. Roy DeMeo, with the car thing in Kuwait, that brought a lot of heat. That's actually what got Paul Castellano indicted to begin with. A lot of people have claimed it was John Gotti and all of this shit, and it's not true. It was Roy DeMeo that gets Paul Castellano indicted. And so the idea that they would go to John Gotti to kill Roy DeMeo is a little nonsense to me, because oftentimes, especially when you consider who Roy DeMeo is, that's going to be something that they're going to subcontract likely out to another family. If not, they're going to handle it internally, and they're sure as hell not going to give it to John Gotti at that point. Nino Gaggi's the one that did it, along with Anthony Center and Joey Testa. They clipped him in a fucking garage. That's the truth. That's the way it always went down. I don't know how people, and I'm not like insulting the intelligence of whoever, who asked the question, because it's a good question to ask. I think the reality is everybody wants to put John Gotti in every fucking hit that ever happened, every fucking piece of drama. I still get questions about the Chin trying to kill Gotti and Frankie DeChico getting blown up in a car. Had nothing to do with him. This was a beef between Gas Pipe Casso and fucking Angelo Ruggiero. People keep getting this wrong. And I think that historically the reason why people get it wrong is because it sounds better. It sounds like vigilante justice. It sounds like retribution, vendetta type of stuff, movie type of shit. But the truth is, John Gotti had nothing to do with Roy DeMeo in that aspect. This is the same thing that I get with like Richard Kuklinski all the time. He was a big mob hit guy. No, he wasn't. He was a serial killer. That's all that Richard Kuklinski ever was. Sammy Gravano didn't know who the fuck Richard Kuklinski was. Half the mob has never heard this guy's name before. Tommy Patera's never heard this guy's name before. These are guys that were active on the street in the same time period, and if they've never heard this guy's name before, come on, it's bullshit. Richard Kuklinski failed on every level to tell the truth. Even the FBI were like, we would love to say that Richard Kuklinski was a mob hitman because they could have put 1 million people away for that. The problem with it is he lied. He didn't tell the truth about anything. He killed people for his own he had mental issues or whatever, and just killed a bunch of people. This idea that he was some rogue mob hitman is absolutely fucking ridiculous. But no. John Gotti never turned down a DeMeo hit, never had anything to do with it. This was Nino Gaggi was told to do it, to handle it. It was Nino Gaggi's problem. And that's just the result. And that's why there's no repercussions, because it never existed to begin with. All right. Ralph Natali says he was made by Carlo Gambino, Angelo Bruno, and belonged to both families. And Vito Rizzuto was in both the Montreal Mafia and the Bonanno family. Have you heard of anyone else in multiple families? The realistic answer I can give you is this. Ralph Natali's full of shit. He's the biggest joke and storyteller I've ever heard in my life. He is a rat, so it's like he... The thing about Ralph Natali is even George Anastasia, and I don't even want to talk about George Anastasia ever again, but even George Anastasia said the guy was full of shit. And for George to come out and tell the truth about something is pretty fucking rare. But the fact that he said that this whole book that George Anastasia wrote was just absolute garbage. I don't buy any of it. I think it's bullshit. I don't think he belonged to two families. He was in Philadelphia for a reason. That's the end of that. I know at one point John Stampa was kind of on both sides of the fence. There have been guys throughout history that sort of play both sides. But to be a captain in one family and a captain in another, I don't buy it. I don't think that the mob is designed like that. I think being associated with somebody is one thing. Vito Rizzuto absolutely is the one case where you can make an argument. First of all, he's in another country. He's in Montreal, so he's the boss of one family and a captain in the Bonanno crime family. And that was by design. I still don't understand it for the life of me. And this will go back to the Joey Messino thing. Why the hell Vito Rizzuto ever got involved in a fucking murder at the behest of the Bonannos is beyond my understanding why he would do that. I think it had a lot to do with trying to forge a bond between Montreal and the Bonannos. But I never understood why he participated in that. And ultimately, you can really break it down into what happened to Vito Rizzuto. That was the beginning of the end for him too. So, there's guys that play both sides, like Anthony Centro, Joey Testa, were, around one core group, and then they ended up near the Lucchese. So it's like guys go back and forth all the time. In fact, Gravano, I think, was brought around by the Lucchese's, I believe. I could be wrong about that, but I think he originally came up as a Lucchese guy. So, guys, there's an ebb and flow to everything, but to be made into one family and be a leader in another, I just don't think it's accurate. I just don't buy it. All right. When it comes to kicking up money to the mob, we know soldiers kick up to the capos kick up to the underboss, then to the boss. How does the consigliere typically fall into that pecking order? Same deal. Money flows upwards. Always flows. Sometimes, and listen, this is not going to be a perfect answer because obviously I'm not in the mafia. So there are certain things I don't think anybody knows, but I think the reality is anybody that's in a leadership role has a crew underneath of them. They're getting money from somewhere, and everybody kicks up. It's a flow chart. All the money goes up. So I think that's pretty much the best way that I can answer that. Okay. How did mob families start in smaller towns like Kansas City, Denver? Where did they all get started? Are they all connected to New York? How did they approach the commission? This is way too big of a question. I can't answer it today. The safe thing is look, at the turn of the century, when any ethnic group, it doesn't matter if it's Italians, it's the Irish, it's the Polish, it's the German, it's the Russians, whatever. There are going to be criminals that are going to come into a country. They're naturally going to stick to their own ethnic roots. This goes back in time. And guys get involved in crime. Not everybody who's ever been in organized crime is Italian. Not everybody who's been in organized crime is Russian, Jewish, or whatever. And not every single person of organized crime has an affiliation to the New York Mafia. You can be in organized crime and not have a fucking attachment to one particular family. You can be an associate on every different level with people. I've always thought that there is some sort of, not majestic, that's a fucking horrible word. I think that the guys that can make money are willing to do certain things and cannot get made are safer than those that do. As long as you can murder and mayhem and make a lot of money, you're going to be safe in that life. There's always going to be a beef over something and always petty jealousy and all of that stuff. But I think that historically, guys like Jimmy Burke, Joe Watts, these are guys that typically can't be made into a mob family, but you see what they're able to do with what they have. So the idea of Kansas City, Denver, and all of this, listen, criminals come into the country, they settle in a place, they start their own little thing. Not necessarily everybody goes back to New York or has attachments here and there. So when I get a chance, I can sit down and talk about Kansas City individually, Denver individually, and San Francisco and San Jose and all these other little places. But for me to try to wrap an answer into this question in under an hour is just damn near impossible. All right. With Merlino's dad being underboss to Scarfo and Salvi Testa being a top capo, do you think they could have taken the family over once Testa married Merlino's daughter? Might they have had all the power? Oh, boy. All right. I had to be careful how I answer this one. I think that here's the first thing. If you listen to what authors say, if you listen to what news reporters say, they will tell you Salvi Testa was killed for two reasons. The first reason why Salvi Testa was killed was because at the last second he bailed out of the Merlino wedding, disrespecting the Merlino family. He's got to go. The problem that I have with that, I'm sure there was a lot of anger and embarrassment and fucking frustration and people felt disrespected. I'm not arguing that. But you got to look at who Nicky Scarfo was. He was a maniac. If he dreamed that you were a rat, he'd kill you. He killed a fucking horse. He threw a horse off a fucking cliff. Who does this? The horse bucked me off. Fuck him. Kill him. Throw him off a fucking cliff. Fuck him. Nicky Scarfo was out of control. And I'm in no way saying that Nicky Scarfo was the most atrocious mob boss ever, but he fucking ruined Philadelphia. I'll tell you that much. That was he ruined Philadelphia. Regardless of what your argument's going to be about the Riccobene faction, who the fuck were they bothering? They weren't kicking up under fucking Angelo Bruno. Why should they kick up under Scarfo? Small select group. They're not going to hurt nobody. So what does Nicky Scarfo do? Fuck them. They don't want to pay me. I'm going to kill every single one of them. It's audacity. You cannot control a crime family and react that way to everything. And that was Nicky. That's how Nicky handled business. So to say that Nicky killed him, Nicky killing him was an easy excuse to say he offended, a top guy in my crew. He offended his daughter. He's gone. I would love to tell you that that's how and why it happened. But I think realistically, and there are probably people that know a little bit better about that situation than me, but all I can say from my perspective is Nicky was just looking for a fucking reason. Nicky wanted to be the face of everything. This is Nicky who said, when you shoot a guy, drop a gun, leave a gun at the scene. Who does that? That's like Godfather shit. So it's like, from my perspective, in my opinion only, I think that Nicky was just looking for a valid excuse, and I think the Merlino issue gave him a fucking excuse. I think Salvi was going to go because Nicky was afraid he was getting too popular. Nicky was afraid he was getting too powerful. Nicky was afraid he was too good-looking. And by all accounts, from what I've heard, he was an up-and-coming guy and a good guy, but at the same time, Nicky doesn't want the light to shine on anybody. So the Merlino wedding fiasco gave him a fucking street reason to do it. But the reality is he did it because Nicky doesn't like anybody outshining him. So the idea that had Testa not been killed, what would have happened? I still think it would have happened the same way. Nicky was going to end up going to prison regardless. And think about it. If, let's say that the wedding thing still happens, Scarfo goes to prison, Testa stays out on the street, there's still going to be retribution for that. So, I can't really play devil's advocate on the question, but I don't think that Salvi Testa would have taken control of anything. I think that if it hadn't have been Scarfo, it would have been somebody else. That's just what I seem to think. But I could be wrong, and I'm sure I'm going to get some interesting phone calls on that one. What the fuck are you talking about this for and that for? Why are you bringing up shit? But that's the question. That's my answer. Okay. Do you think Sammy Gravano would have been a part of the Gambino administration if Frankie DeCicco had been alive? No, absolutely not. I think that he got the position by proxy. Listen, Sammy Gravano, no matter what you want to say, he's a rat bastard, piece of shit, scumbag fuck, but he was an earner. Would kill people, wouldn't hesitate, killed a lot of people to take over the businesses because he was a greedy prick, killed a 17-year-old kid. But I think, realistically, if Frankie doesn't get killed in that car bomb, which Gaspipe Casso arranged, not for John Gotti, but because it was a beef between Angelo and Gaspipe, but that's a whole nother story. I don't think so. I don't think Sammy was right for the administration. People are going to argue with me and say, well, he's a gangster. Well, you know what? Fuck him. He's a rat. I don't think he was right for the part. I also think had John Gotti not been indicted, he would have put 6 in Sammy's fucking head at some point. You almost have to. Just because Sammy was bringing heat, too. It wasn't just Gotti. It wasn't just, Angelo talking on the phone. It was a lot of different things. A lot of things go into that chain of events. But I don't think that Gravano, under any circumstance, would have ended up in a leadership role. He just stayed a captain. That would have been it. But when people go, people get killed. You gotta bring. And I think that was honestly, if Gotti made a mistake, I think that's a huge mistake that he made. Bringing the green-eyed demon into the fold, I would have never done it. But then again, I'm not in the mob. I'm not a mob boss, so it is what it is. But no, I don't think so. I don't think it would have made any sense. You're better off having a guy like that who's making a ton of money, not being a leadership role. But that's just my opinion. Okay, what do you think the most interesting era of the mob was? Oh, God. I want to say between like 58 and 65 or 58 to 68. Those 10 years were really incredible. Of course, the 20s and 30s would have been exciting, but I think like from 1957, like maybe pre-Appalachian, so maybe like 56 through like 67, 68 would have been some very, very interesting stuff. Because a lot of historical references and a lot of historical things happen. Costello gets shot at. There's all this kind of mob turf war, the Bonanno bullshit that happens with Joe Bonanno. So I think it would have been an interesting time period to sort of live in. And I think that was truly the heyday of the mafia. I think past 68, forget about it. I think 20s and 30s, it was more gangster than it was, say, mafia-oriented. 70s, forget it. 80s, forget it. 90s, laughable. So I think like the heyday of the mob really kind of right around 68, 69, 1970 changed. The whole dynamic changed. It's still the mob, and they're still doing their thing, but just the dynamic changed for me. So I think that time period was probably my favorite historically. Anyway, okay. What are your thoughts on Angelo Gyp DiCarlo? Look, Gyp was a Genovese guy based out of Jersey. He totally dominated the loan sharking industry in Jersey in the 1960s. He was an associate of Longy Zwillman and Gerardo Catania. He also owned the police and the government. And the reason why this even gets found out is because he gets caught on wiretaps admitting that he owns politicians, government, policemen, and all that kind of stuff. He controlled the mayor's office. He would never hesitate not to murder anybody. And the funny thing about him is he would talk openly about humane murder versus killing a prick. There's two differences. For him, it was shooting a guy in the heart. That's humane. But if you don't like him, there's other ways to kill him to make it more brutal. So there's being a humane murderer versus a psychopathic killer. So I always find that kind of ironic. But he was a ruthless guy. I don't know if he was, and I'm not going to say he's the most powerful guy to ever come out of Jersey. A lot of people say that, but he didn't fuck around either. He wasn't a soft guy in any stretch of the imagination. But the most powerful guy out of Jersey, forget it, not true. I don't buy that. But as a side note to Gyp DiCarlo, there was a character in Jersey Boys, which is about Frankie Valli in the Four Seasons. There, Christopher Walken plays a character named Gyp, which is based after Gyp DiCarlo. So if you're interested in him, look up. There's a lot of information out there on him. Definitely a tough guy, but most powerful to come out of Jersey. Not so much. All right. How was Greg Scarpa able to conceal the fact that he was a government rat for 30 fucking years? Did he just kill everybody he suspected of knowing? Also, to the best of your knowledge, what is the word on the streets when the article broke that he was a rat for so long? Here's the first thing. Regardless of what you think about Greg Scarpa, he is a rat. There's a lot of fairy tales they tell with him, like the thing with the Mississippi shit is complete lies, never happened. That's a narrative and a story that's been spun by the Scarpa family for a long time that isn't accurate. It's not true. In fact, it's been argued and proven factually that never happened. I think that was a story designed to make himself feel better about what he did. But if you have to look at Greg Scarpa as the whole, this is the way I sort of look at him. Take away the rat shit for a second. Greg Scarpa was an evil fuck. He didn't fuck around. He was a good gangster, tough gangster, but he's a rat. So, I have a hard time, validating him in any sense of the word. But the reason why he gets away with it is because who the fuck's going to say anything to Greg Scarpa? Everybody was terrified of him. If you even mentioned that he could be a rat, he'd kill you. That's the end of it. The FBI was covering his ass, allowed him to murder while he was an FBI informant, did nothing to stop it. So I think, they allowed him to instigate the fucking the Colombo Wars in a lot of ways. On house arrest, leaves the house, gets into a shootout. So these are all things that happen, but who's going to go to Greg Scarpa and threaten him? Who's going to go to Greg Scarpa and make that accusation to his face? Nobody. So that's how he gets away with it. I think that the mob, and maybe this is a stretch, but I think they kind of knew too. Because when everybody's getting arrested and Scarpa seems to not do any time and Scarpa seems to never get arrested, that's your sign. Especially when you're at the top of what you do, you're a psychopath and you kill people at will and have no problem doing it, and you never get indicted, you never get arrested, that should have been the sign. And that's why he gets away with it for 30 years. Anybody that came close to finding out, he killed. That's the bottom line. As far as when it came out that he was a rat, what can you do at that point? What can you do at any point when it's found out that this guy's a rat? You can't, today with technology and everything, you can't get to the guy to kill him. You can't get to the guy to kill him. And two, I'm going to even add to who's going to get a gun and go after Greg Scarpa in those days with knowing who Greg Scarpa was. And that's sort of that's how he gets away with it, because nobody's going to say nothing to him. At that point, by the time people in the public find out the guy's a rat, it's too fucking late. He's already got everybody pinched and locked up and whatever else. So whoever would be out on the street Now you take a risk killing a witness or a federal informant. It's just not going to happen. So I think that that's probably why he gets away with it. All right, and a part of this question too is like, what about Whitey Bulger? This is where I differ from a lot of people. I have a huge argument with people that tell me Kevin Weeks is a stand-up guy. Kevin Weeks is a fucking rat. You can't listen. He uses, and I can't. Let me see how I can say this without getting myself in a little hot water. There are people in this world that become informants that blame it on everybody else and say, well, they told on me first. That's why I did it. That's a cop-out, and it's bullshit. You rat because you're rat because you're rat. That's it. Anybody like Kevin Weeks who can say, well, I never would have said nothing, but he said something about me, so therefore it doesn't make it right. Two wrongs don't make it right. You're supposed to be better than that. There's a code of the street. You just don't say nothing if you're in the streets. You see my point? So the idea, I have if anybody's out there, watch the United States of America versus Whitey Bulger. I think it was on Netflix. You might be able to catch it on YouTube now. It's a very interesting perspective of some things that might change your mind about what society has said about Whitey Bulger as far as how deep some of the things he allegedly said versus what the actual truth of what he said was. If you look at just the copy of the 302s, if you know anything about 302s, these are not like a half a paragraph and that's it. 302s about any given subject are like hundreds of pages long. If you go into Whitey Bulger's 302s and you look at John Connolly, he writes one sentence on a couple of pages. Half the time it's regurgitated information. Half the time it's bullshit information. It's not even accurate. So Connolly was serving two purposes. He was keeping Whitey on the street by fabricating bullshit. You can look into that for yourself. I'm not going to make that argument on this show because we'll be here all day because I could talk about that topic all day. But for the sake of what this person is asking, I think the fact that when it came out publicly that Whitey Bulger was a rat, I think there were probably some of those who probably suspected it. I think there are some that still to this day they don't even believe it. Because of the way that John Connolly handled things, just because of the way certain evidence came out, the FBI really went to extremes to cover their ass in this specific case, and you really need to invest the time. Don't take my word for it. Invest the time yourself and read up on it and research it, because when you look into it for what it is, some of the shit the FBI alleges just doesn't make any fucking sense. It really, really, really doesn't. I'm not saying that Whitey didn't rat and didn't say things. That's not my stance. I just think that the FBI made this a lot bigger than it really factually was. I think Kevin Weeks has used the fact that Whitey was a rat to rat. So it's like, really, the compunction for me is to say, if you're in the streets and somebody tells on you, tough shit. What else can you do? You take your pinch, you go away, whatever. But then to turn around and go, well, no, he did it first, so I'm going to tell now. Kevin Weeks isn't strong. He's weak. His last name fits his personality. Weeks. He's weak. Because he's a rat. And that's the reality of it. People can try to twist it around all day long and say, well, you can't say that. I can. So, all right. We all know the real reason why Billy Batts, a.k.a. William Benvena, was killed by Jimmy Burke. And Jimmy Burke had swallowed up all of his rackets, made them profitable, and then when Billy Batts, a.k.a. William Benvena, gets out of prison, Jimmy Burke absolutely refuses to give them back. And then ultimately we know that William Benvena gets killed. Why in the first place did the Gambinos allow an associate from another family to take them over in the first place? Jimmy Burke was an earner. Jimmy Burke had a lot of business with the Gambinos at the airport. That's exactly why. Jimmy Burke carried a lot of weight. Not only was he violent and did things for everybody, but he made everybody a lot of money. And that's the thing that people need to understand. When you're willing to kill for anybody and you're making a lot of crime families a lot of money, do you really think they're going to fucking argue with some shitbag that just got out of prison after 20 years or whatever and wants a racket back? These rackets, by the way, had quadrupled in profits for everyone. So really, at that point, it's fucking null and void. And to further the question, then to add insult to injury, Jimmy whacks the guy when he wants his business back and nobody tries to retaliate. Why would they? They're all making a ton of money. They're not going to get... listen, Jimmy Burke carried a lot of weight, but Jimmy Burke made them money. Jimmy Burke, the airports with John Gotti, Jimmy Burke, Paul Vario, Jimmy Burke with this guy and that guy. Jimmy Burke was the guy. I don't know why it's hard for people to understand that. The question goes on. The Gambinos had hundreds of button men on the street. And what, did Jimmy not fear anyone? Would fuck with him no matter what he did? I find that hard to believe. He was tough, but wasn't as susceptible as the next man? He was, but he wasn't. When you're feared and you're making a shitload of money for everybody, business is business. There's no personal shit in this. Business is business. Guys get killed on the street. Guys don't like each other in the street all the time. But if they're making $100 million a year together or $50,000 a month together, they're not going to kill each other over it. They're making money. Crime 101. Keep making money. Don't kill the loan shark victim because you keep making that money. You keep wanting that money to come the fuck in. Killing a guy over fucking 50 grand, what's the point? You're collecting the 6 points to 9 points every week. 6 points on the low end. 9 points is probably more legitimate. You're getting 9 points a week from this guy. What the fuck are you going to kill him for? Then you lose your money coming in. Then you're never going to get back to fucking principal. So the point is that when you earn a shitload of money for the mob, you are willing to kill for them. You're feared and respected. I don't know where the question comes in. Jimmy Burke was a tough guy. It was better off for the Gambinos and the Lucchese's and everybody else. It was better off that they have Jimmy doing what he was doing. This other guy goes to prison. So what? Rackets get swallowed up. We've seen this in a lot of other mob families. Guys get locked up. They go to fucking prison. They come out. They want to scream, bitch, and complain, and they want their rackets back. You tell me how many of those guys got their rackets back? 1 out of 50, maybe. 1 out of 50. Jimmy made it profitable. Guy gets clipped. That's the end of it. And that's why nobody reacts to that murder. Because who's going to go against Jimmy Burke? It was a business thing. The less they know, the better off that they are. And then that's the reality of it. So, maybe you don't understand Jimmy Burke the way I do. Maybe you don't understand the rackets like I do, or you don't understand the life like I do. But the reality is business. Money is money. That's the bottom line. All right. How many bad misfortunes have there been while the mob has gotten innocent people killed? Well, in Italy, forget about it. They go crazy. They blow up bridges and shit over there. So over there, it's completely different. We know about Sammy Gravano and Alan Kaiser, the Roy DeMeo shooting the vacuum cleaner salesman and gas pipe killing somebody by the wrong name and putting a hit on a woman. Why have some of these guys gotten away with that? That's $1 million question, and I asked this to somebody. I'm not going to get into who it was, but my big question was, how in the fuck could John Gotti ever let Sammy Gravano get away with killing a 17-year-old kid? The simple answer is he didn't know, and that's the problem. There's talk in the street. This guy did that. This guy did that. I honestly don't think, and I could be wrong, this is my opinion, I think that if John Gotti knew that Sammy Gravano and Louis Melito killed a 17-year-old kid, both of them would have been murdered immediately. I could tell you that if that happened in the Genovese crime family, the Chen would have fucking killed them within hours. Wouldn't have hesitated. I can also tell you that if in the Gambinos somebody killed a woman, they would have been killed immediately. I could tell you in the Genoveses, if they had killed a woman, they'd have been killed immediately. For some reason, the Lucchese's do things or did things anyway back in those days a little bit differently. So the clear answer I can give you to this is that I think in some cases they didn't know. And in some cases, when, like, say, Roy DeMeo gets into the shootout with the vacuum cleaner salesman and they're shooting all the way down to, like, fucking Bed-Stuy, firing out the window trying to kill this kid. And ultimately they do. First of all, there's going to be heat all over the place because everybody and their mother just saw you doing the shit. Then you kill DeMeo, you're going to bring 3 times the fucking heat on top of you. So that's why I can explain that one away. The Gravano thing bothers me to no end. He should have been killed for that. Him and Louis Melito. That's why I don't feel bad for Louis Melito at all. I really don't. They killed a 17-year-old kid. Fuck them. They got killed. Louis Melito got butchered. I don't give a fuck. Fuck him. I don't feel bad for him. I don't feel bad for his family. No. Not when you kill a 17-year-old kid who was doing nothing. That's ridiculous. That's disgusting and it's vile. Gravano never paid for that crime. He should have been locked away in a cell the rest of his life without parole for that. But whatever, the FBI, and we'll look past that. But I think that there is a question. Why does the mob let that happen? I don't know. I can tell you that in a certain time period, there's no way they would have allowed that. But, 80s and 90s were a little, 80s specifically, early 80s, mid 80s were a little reckless and a lot of crazy shit going on. But it's not right. It's not right. There should be a code in a way that somebody conducts themselves. I remember back in the day, if the mob thought somebody was gay, they'd kill him. I mean, but, everything changes with time and history. And it's unfortunate that those things happen. But that's the safe answer is, I think in some cases they didn't know. And two, you got to be able to prove it. You just can't say, oh, well, we heard he did it, kill him. They've got to have more than that. Sometimes they don't. It just depends who the order comes from. All right, last question of the Q&A. Is it true the feds wiretapped some of the DeCavalcantes comparing themselves to the Sopranos in court? Absolutely. Go out and get a book. I want to say that George Anastasia wrote this, but I could be totally wrong. But I think it's called the Goodfella Tapes. It's hilarious. There's another one. The Goodfella Tapes is sort of like that. There's another one too, and I don't know if George Anastasia wrote that or not. But check that book out. So that's all we got for the Q&A. Hopefully next week we get a lot more questions. It was just a weird week. But there is one thing I want to talk about before I go to a break and we come back and do Tony Salerno. And I wasn't going to do this. I and I'm not going to rant. I think I could say this in a very, very quick, thoughtful manner. I do not watch Mob Talk shit down. I don't like Anastasia. I don't like Dave Ratweiser. I think they're both cowards. I think they're both liars. I thought it was, and the only reason why I'm bringing this specifically up is because somebody sent me the link and said, you should really watch the first 10 minutes of this and then the last 8. You're not going to believe it. So in the first 10 minutes, George Anastasia echoes what I've been saying for fucking 6 months. What I've been saying about the evidence in the trial, about the way the judge handled the sentencing. And I have an epiphany. And I say to myself, is Anastasia on drugs? For him to come out and like him and I to even be on the same page as anything. This, and keep in mind, I've been saying this for 7-8 months now. This is nothing new. It might be new for him to like come out and say something positive and actually say the fucking truth. But I watch this and I kind of laugh because it's bullshit. And I know before it's over, George Anastasia is going to turn it on its ass and make a dumb fuck out of himself. And he does. And he does. My beef has been, my beef will always be. You can be a reporter, you can be a journalist, and you can talk loosely with people on the streets. Never name your sources, even though it's no big fucking secret. But you tongue-in-cheek it. Oh, well, guys on the street are telling us. The FBI is fucking telling you and rats are telling you. If any of that information is coming from within, then, you know, there's a way to handle that. I think that if you're going to put if you need to insert information to put a different spin on something, by all means, I totally get that. I don't have a problem with anybody talking to anybody when it comes to that. But he talked about something very specific, tried to make it into the fucking Appalachian meeting of 2018, and it's nonsense. All it does, there is a difference between loosely talking to somebody, being nice to somebody's face. Maybe they give you a little bit and say, well, you know, we had this party, or we went here and we did this, or we went here and did that. Then that's what you report. You don't twist it around and say, well, the indictments are coming, and this guy was here, that guy was here, and this is what his position is, this is what his position is. First of all, you're fucking wrong, like in 90% of the shit you said. That's the first thing. Second thing is, you have a duty at some point to, like, provide information. I get it. You're a journalist. You're going to write a fucking story. But get your fucking facts right. You're lying. You're telling an absolute lie. If I'm telling you he's lying, trust me, he's lying. And maybe that's a good thing. That is a good thing that he's lying and isn't smart enough to know really the fucking facts. But the problem is that the way he distorts the reality of people watching this fucking putrid shit show that he does, then I could care less about his fucking numbers. I really could. It's not about that. You know, he does good work, but he lies. That's the truth. And he gets his facts wrong. And it's always this guy on the street. And then Ratweiser comes along, look like a fucking canary, took a shit on his face, talking about street guys have been telling me. What street guy in their right fucking mind is going to have a conversation with you? I've been in rooms where street guys have called you a jerk off. You think you got it made. Dave, stay fucking retired and go bird watching and jerk yourself off to like fucking whatever. But the bottom line is this, and then I'm going to stop, is that I totally anybody that argues with me, well, he's a journalist, this is what they do. Totally get that. I don't have a problem with that. But you could tell the truth. If you're going to lie, don't make it sound so fucking ridiculous like the Martians are fucking landing and they're all mob captains. Get the fuck out of here. Guy doesn't have any better information than anybody. He gets his information from rats and the FBI. And that's my issue is that if there's a secret meeting taking place in a cave, in a grotto, and made guys are all meeting there, and it's the Appalachian Conference of 2018 in Philadelphia, why are you going to put guys' names out there? Why are you going to say shit about people? Why? I don't get it. I've never done that, and I never will. You can tongue-in-cheek it and write your fucking article in a way that said various members of the Martian gang were there. You can say that without putting people's business out there. That's what makes him a pile of shit to me. That's what makes him a fucking scumbag. A complete scumbag. And then he rounds it out by talking once again by that fat stuttering prick, Ron Previty. Ron Previty, I ate myself to death. I'm still a loan shark. That's right, loan shark. That fat fuck that he was. Surprised he didn't write a soliloquy or a poem about John Vesey. How much they had fun together. All right, so all that being said, listen. Not for nothing, I don't want to rant and scream about stupid shit no more. I really don't. First of all, I don't have time for it. And second of all, I'm regurgitating the same shit. I'm not trying to ruin nobody's career. I'm just telling you the fucking truth. People don't like the truth. People definitely do not like the truth. And they can say, well, that's your truth, Jeff. You're lopsided. I had somebody send me you guys aren't going to believe this. I had somebody send me a fucking message with Bible verses telling me I had demons in me because I said Joey Merlino was a great guy. I had somebody tell me I needed to have an exorcism because of the way I rant. I had somebody tell me I was going to hell for sitting next to someone in a courthouse or for having a hushed conversation about nothing important at all. Just normal guy gossip bullshit that guys talk about. It's crazy. And then I got that scumbag Rubio sending me fucking freaky messages that guy's fucking nuts. Listen, I've talked to a lot of people in my life. I've had run-ins with people that are miscreants, scumbags, jerk-offs. This guy takes the fucking cake. He's like snorting coke off of fucking male strippers' asses before he fucking messages me. I can tell you that. Because it starts you guys, I should make a book called Rubio Poetry. You wouldn't believe this fucking shit that this guy says. He's fucking nuts. This guy says to me, I put 47 guys away in prison, 3 bosses. I'm an American hero. You're a fucking this. You're a fucking that. You're a fucking this. You're a fucking that. Like, this is what this guy believes. He's a fucking hero. Like, you're a fucking scumbag. And the funniest thing about it is, so the information that I put out in a couple of different articles, they came directly from evidence. They came directly from stuff that was in court. I didn't invent this shit. First of all, I'm not a fucking lawyer. I don't speak fucking legalese. I barely speak fucking English without cursing. So I'm not a lawyer. I don't know legalese. But when I look at the case file that's right in front of my fucking face, and it's talking about evidence instances with evidence numbers, and I print it out and I write it up and I insert it in my article, and this jerk-off comes back to me and says, none of it's true, it's all lies. What fucking planet does this guy live on? Not only is he like making arguments that don't exist, but he wants everybody to believe he's the Sammy Gravano of the Bronx. You robbed. This is why when I tell people Rubio wasn't believable and he was a scumbag, a jerk-off, and a lying fuck, this is why I say that. Because of how he's reacting. I don't even interact with the fucking guy. He just sends message after message like a crushed girlfriend who can't deal with the fact that somebody don't like him. Because listen, he tells me every day what a jerk-off I am, how I don't know nothing, how I'm stupid, I'm this and that and the third. But boy, the truth fucking must... If I'm nobody, right? Let's admit it, I'm fucking nobody, all right? But here's the thing. Why are you going to let a nobody bother you to the point where you make threats and you say shit's going to happen to me and you say horrible things about Joey Merlino, which I got to admit, I don't like anybody talking about Joey or anybody. But it's sort of funny, the shit he says, because it's like he's a little girl. He's a heartbroken fucking cheerleader. He's a teeny bopper whose father ripped off his fucking poster of John Stamos off the fucking wall in 1989. He's got such a fucking love affair with Joey Merlino. It's weird. I just don't get it. It seems like every one of these informants that has a mouth... Jeff, be careful. It seems like they got like these tendencies. They got tendencies. Joey this, Joey that. Junior this. And I can go on and on. They all do the same thing. They have like some weird fucking... I don't even know what the fuck it is. They're infatuated with the people they were around. They rat on them, and then they're still like in love with them. And it's the creepiest, most disturbing fucking swamp creature type of shit I've ever seen. So when I tell you the guy's full of shit, you can trust me. If you don't believe me, do yourself a favor. Join Pacer, pacer.com. I think it's pacer.gov, actually. Maybe I'm wrong. Go to Pacer. It's 10 cents per piece of paper to download and to look at. If you don't believe anything I'm fucking saying, do it yourself. Pay the fucking money, invest the time, read the evidence, and you're going to come right back to me and say, holy shit, you were fucking right. People think that I'm willing to make up legal facts that have been put into a court of fucking law, a federal court of law at that, because of some sort of association I have with somebody. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely fucking ridiculous. Rubio says, oh, you'd come in your pants if Joey Merlino smirked at you once. And it's like... Everything was like sort of on the borderline with this guy sexually retarded or something. I don't get it. Like, listen, I don't, it doesn't matter who I've met, who I know, who I talk to, who I laugh with. It doesn't make me any special. It doesn't make me tough guy. None of it does. Listen, I am not impressed when somebody tells me they know somebody. I'm like, okay, so you know somebody. You met them at a fucking, a bathroom stall talking about the fucking Boston Celtics. That doesn't make you a tough guy. It doesn't make you a street guy. It doesn't make you a connected guy. It means you had a conversation with somebody that was fucking pointless, and now you got an ego about it. You think it makes you tough. So, anyway, I'm going to shut the fuck up before I get in trouble, because there is something I was going to say, but that's going to get me in a lot of hot water. So the reality is that... Oh, and you know what? Maybe... I don't know if I... no, I can't say that. I want to say that, but that's... See, there's something I want to say that it involves Rubio, but the problem is that I don't know... No, it's definitely not going to be a Braid situation if I bring that up. Nothing disparaging about anybody outside of that. It's just there was... I can't go there, damn it. Let's just say this way, that Rubio accosted me so many fucking times that a lot of people have seen those messages, and they all know what a fucking nut job he is. And we're just going to leave it at that. Because I think sometimes people doubt what I say, and then they actually see it for themselves, and they say, holy shit, you go through this on a daily basis? Oh yeah, times 10. Every rat and their mother hates me. They don't like me. They don't like me calling them what they are. But here's my thing. They don't go after Anastasia when he does it. Oh, no, they're not going to do that. They come after me. All of them. They come after me. The guy they keep saying is fucking a nothing, a loser, a bottom dweller, a swamp creature, a rabbit fucker, whatever it is that they come up with. Because they got some real one-line zingers, these fucking nut jobs. You know, they couldn't bullshit or talk their way out of a fucking glass jar of dildos. But the thing is that for me being the biggest loser and the most ill-informed motherfucker on the streets and the most ill-informed fucker ever and the most unimportant motherfucker, boy, they spend an awful lot of time sending me messages. So something's getting to them. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to get to Tony Salerno. In my travels, I'm always looking for a clothing brand that I feel like represents me. Anybody can go to a store and buy a t-shirt with a gimmick, but if you believe in 3 core values like I do, loyalty, honor, and respect, then look no further than Omerta Brand Clothing. You can catch them at omertamia.com, OMERTAMIA.com, with locations in Europe, California, Boston, Brooklyn, Florida, Pennsylvania, and Washington. They have a great clothing line with hats, shirts, sweatshirts, keychains, anything you might need, stickers. You want the rats to stop snitching? Go right out and get yourself a sticker. But if you want to live your life by the gentleman's code, look no further than Omerta Brand Clothing. And welcome back to Mob Talk Radio. We are talking Tony Salerno. We're going to get right into it. Tony Salerno was born in 1911 in East Harlem, New York. He sort of begins his career as in the mob, really into the gambling, numbers, and loan sharking and protection rackets underneath the Lucky Luciano and the Lucky Luciano crime family at the time, which would eventually morph into what we know as the Genovese crime family today. Salerno was also a member of the 116th Street Crew, which at the time was led by Trigger Mike Coppola. The 116th Street Crew, if you don't know who they are, you can look it up. I'm going to give you a little bit of biographical information here just for my own purposes and for yours. But there's a lot that you can consume looking up the 116th Street Crew. But they were also known as the Uptown Crew, and they were one of the most powerful crews in the Genovese crime family. They operated out of the Palma Boys Social Club at 416 East, 115th Street in East Harlem. Back in the early 1890s, a group of 4 brothers, the Morello and Terranova brothers. Now, you might get confused here. The Morellos, Terranovas were related. Different mothers in certain situations like that. So when I say Morello and Terranova, they're all of the same family. You had Joe, Niccolo, Vincenzo, and Ciro arrived in New York City via Corleone, Sicily. The Morello-Terranova brothers began to take over Little Italy and East Harlem by using the black hand technique of extorting small businesses and running major illegal gambling operations. The group became known as the 116th Street Mob. With their increasing power, they sort of begin to take control over lower Manhattan's Little Italy. At the time, Manhattan's Little Italy was controlled by Ignazio Lupo the Wolf Sciarra. Before war would erupt, both factions sort of combined together, and Giuseppe Morello became the official boss of bosses, but in 1910, Sciarra and Morello would be arrested for counterfeiting in 1910. Niccolo Morello would end up taking over, and he would go to war, which had been dubbed the Mafia Camorra War. Camorra was pretty much based in Brooklyn at the time, so it was really a war between the Sicilian Morellos and Brooklyn's Camorra faction, who was at the time led by Pellegrino Marano. Both factions wanted complete and utter control of the Brooklyn docks, and they also wanted full control of all mob activities in New York City and across the United States. Both sides traded bullets, bombs, and murders, and the Morellos would eventually take over control, and whatever was left of the Camorra at the time ends up sort of joining the Morello faction. Salerno was actually a hitman in the early day for the Morellos, and would absolutely, unequivocally not bat an eye at killing somebody. So the idea that he was just simply a financial guy, it isn't really the case. He got his hands a little dirty back in the old days. At age 21, Tony Salerno was made a captain in 1932, and he was probably one of the youngest captains in Mafia history. He worked directly under Trigger Mike Coppola, which we said earlier, and he ends up working his way up the ranks a little bit, and he ends up controlling a massive gambling and loan sharking operation, the likes of which have never been seen or duplicated ever. And I say that because I did an article a long time ago about the top 10 wealthiest mob bosses ever, and Tony Salerno was right at the top. Guy was a fucking genius in every stretch of the imagination. You can't duplicate what that guy was able to do. And two, and you'll probably hear me repeat this a couple of times during this portion of the show, but the one thing is a lot of mob guys in these days, stayed in their neighborhoods, but they would eventually, once the demographics sort of changed a little bit and the Latinos came in and the African Americans came in, a lot of these guys moved out of their neighborhoods. Tony Salerno didn't do that. He stayed right in Harlem. All right, so Tony and his brother Sereno, who also went by Charlie Speed, end up taking over the 116th Street crew, operating in East Harlem in the Bronx. The Salernos oversaw a multi-million-dollar gambling racket based in East Harlem that expanded into Brooklyn and even into the South Bronx. Salerno's gambling empire included the numbers racket, bookmaking, and floating crap games. And like I said earlier, the neighborhood would change from mainly an Italian enclave to African Americans, Hispanics, and etc. But it didn't matter to Tony Salerno. He stuck his heels in and did not move. And he also maintained 200 people that were employed in his street rackets. And that's fucking insane. I don't care how you fucking mix it down. I don't know how many guys in organized crime had 200 people working the streets for them. And then this is before he's like a major, I mean, at the time, he's a capo, but that's like insanity. That's just a shitload of fucking people. In 1959, Salerno ends up throwing his money into boxing. He backed a fight between Ingmar Johansson, who was also dubbed the Great White Hope, and Floyd Patterson. And the fight was held at Yankee Stadium, which ended in a huge upset when the 4-1 underdog Johansson knocked Patterson the fuck out. The fight made over $1 million in closed-circuit TV fees, which made it the most profitable boxing match in the history at that point. So not only is Tony Salerno good at just the numbers racket and controlling different territories, but he puts his hands into boxing. He sees it as a good financial investment. And what we know today with boxing, especially with HBO and MMA, and you see what happens there with just the amount of money. Like, just using as a reference the Conor and Floyd Mayweather fight, just the pay-per-view rentals itself. Tony Salerno was an innovator in terms of realizing that this could make him a lot of fucking money, and believe me, it did. By the 1960s, Salerno controls the largest numbers racket operation in New York City, which was grossing. Keep in mind, this is 1960. You can do the inflation, which I'm kind of going to do for you, but he was grossing over $50 million a year in 1960 in numbers rackets alone, which is equivalent to about $400 million. One person. Most crime families do not make, well, okay, they probably do, but $400 million is a shitload of money. This guy was doing it all on his own. That's fucking insane. That puts him on a whole nother playing field. Many gangsters had left the Harlem area, like I said earlier, especially when other groups came in, but Salerno stayed and kept that his base of operations. Rather than use race as a reason to leave, he would often employ Latinos and African Americans in construction rackets, and was also known to secretly help those who were struggling financially in his own neighborhood. So once again, we see this is sort of a generational thing, and what I mean by that is a lot of these guys took care of their neighborhood. Now, it's not the Joey Gallo effect where Joey Gallo employed narcotics traffickers that were African American and Latino and sort of like brought them into the fold and treated them as one of his own. That's not what Salerno did. Salerno would ensure that people in his neighborhood got jobs on construction rackets that he owned. He made sure that everybody was fed and had something to eat. That is sort of a throwback. You don't see that these days. A lot of guys take care of their neighbors, but not like this. Nobody in his neighborhood would go without anything. They could go to him for anything, and he would, whatever you needed. Salerno had three main lieutenants, Louis the Gimp, Salvatore Apuzzo, and Louis Vigilante. Through the city, many independent gambling operators were kicking back to Tony Salerno. The Shitter Brothers, which is a hilarious name, by the way, the Shitter Brothers were kicking up a huge tribute from their $30 million a year numbers racket. So Tony wasn't the kind of guy who was going to put a clamp on somebody and say, no, you're not going to operate in my territory. He will let them do it, but then he's going to take a huge fucking kickback from what they're doing. Because in his eyes, and I'm not speaking for him, but just in a roundabout way, if business is good, you don't hinder the next guy, but the next guy's going to kick up a shitload of money to you. And so technically by proxy, you're running a different territory. Somebody else is overseeing it, but you're still getting a huge kickback. And the Shitter Brothers especially, $30 million a year, he was getting a huge kickback off of that. and he was able to just expand his territory completely. Allowing other people to work in your territory is good for economic growth, and it sort of takes the heat off you in case something bad happens there. But like I said, if guys failed to pay a tribute, they didn't survive. Tony Salerno wasn't the type of guy who was passive enough where someone could say no to him. There was always a vested business interest for him, and if they didn't want to sort of come along with it, then he did what he had to do. Salerno has often been said that he was a big peacemaker, very conciliatory in the extent that if people needed advice, he was the guy to go see. Whereas other mafia bosses really didn't intermingle with any families outside of New York. Tony Salerno was completely the opposite. He would reach out to other crews in other states, Rhode Island, Ohio, Florida, and he would establish business ties with them. To him, it was all about business, all about expansion, and that's the way he handled things. A lot of mob bosses really just kind of stuck their heels in their own territory, didn't want to work with a lot of outside crews or outside people because the more that you put yourself out there, the more problems you could have. But Tony didn't see it that way. He saw it as a business investment. Salerno was a highly respected and feared gangster. He was a mafia powerhouse who just kept rising in the ranks. He would become consigliere of the Genoveses from 1972 to 1975, gets the underboss role in 75, and eventually becomes the front boss from 81 to 86. In the late 70s, the FBI managed to place a bug in the Palma Boys Social Club, and it would lead to an arrest charge of being a bookie and making over $1 million a year. Salerno would hire mob mouthpiece Roy Cohn, and on April 20th in 1978, he would be convicted and sentenced to 6 months in federal prison for illegal gambling and tax evasion charges. But we kind of have to step back for just a brief second, because we have to talk about Mickey Spillane for a second, and this is sort of the second jump back into Mickey Spillane for the day. Salerno was behind Mickey Spillane getting whacked. In the 1970s, his construction was beginning on the Jacob K. Javits Convention Center. Spillane pretty much was in that territory, and he refused to kick back to the Italians because he considered the center to be in his territory, in Hell's Kitchen, and he wasn't going to give the Italians a fucking inch. The problem is that Tony Salerno and the Gambino crime family had a deal in place to split profits outside their respective territories on concrete. We've talked about the Concrete Club before. This is a little bit pre-Concrete Club, but it's right on the fringe of it. Spillane, like I said, wouldn't budge an inch, and Salerno gets absolutely pissed, and the Gambinos are absolutely pissed. Who's this Irish prick think he is? Et cetera, et cetera. It also didn't help that Mickey Spillane was hogging Madison Square Garden, the waterfront, and the unions. The mob all felt that they deserved those things, that those were their things. I think even if Mickey Spillane had willing to have been kicked back 20%, 30% on Madison Square Garden, the mob still wouldn't have been happy. They felt like it's their territory, so they think ultimately at the end of the day the same thing fucking happens. But the fact that the convention center is going up and he doesn't want to kick back to anybody, he refuses to give an inch on Madison Square Garden, shit was going to hit the fan. Spillane ended up having enemies absolutely everywhere, and even from within his own group itself. Salerno reaches a point where he says enough is enough. And if I can't reason with this guy, I'm just going to fucking kill him, and that's the end of the day. That's the end of the deal. Salerno also knows that Jimmy Coonan wants to take over Spillane's rackets, and they need a guy who is willing to acquiesce to what they want and not cause a lot of friction. So what Salerno does through a middleman is he hires Mad Dog Sullivan to kill as many members of the crew as he could. And then he aligns himself with Jimmy Coonan. Coonan agrees and tells Tony Salerno, listen, if you back me, I'm going to give you a huge kickback from the projects that started this shit to begin with. He's pretty much going to hand Salerno what he wants. He's going to hand him the Javits Center. He's going to hand him Madison Square Garden. And Salerno says, you know what? I agree. This is what we're going to do. We're going to back you, let you kill Spillane, and we're going to end up giving you a kickback of the profits, and you'll get a little protection. And eventually the Westies ends up moving on to the Gambino crime family protection, but we got to get there first. So Tom Devaney, Tom Capitos, and Eddie Comiskey all get killed. Within a period of a few months, most of Spillane's crew end up getting killed. I believe there was like 12 or 13 or 14 of them in like 6 months that got whacked. Spillane ends up fleeing to Queens, And Jimmy Coonan, by proxy, ends up taking over as official boss, and the Genoveses, through the Gambinos, end up contracting Roy DeMeo to kill Mickey Spillane, which is exactly what happens. The Genoveses, historically, really are the group that used front bosses. It was first established in the 1960s. They were one of the first mob families to do it, and it's often replicated by a lot of different crime families today. After Vito Genovese dies in 1969, Frank Funzi Thierry was installed as the first official front boss to insulate Benny Squint Lombardo. However, it's long been suggested that the Genoveses at the time were actually sort of divided a bit, and they were oversaw by Russell Buffalino for a time before they could decide how to move Tommy Eboli out of the way. We talked if you go back to the show that I did a couple weeks ago about Tommy Eboli, you'll kind of understand. Tommy Eboli was a very unhealthy guy. Physically, he had a lot of medical problems, and Tommy Eboli for a while was the boss, but they used a lot of different front boss schemes, and they actually split a lot of the power base. And at the time, Russell Buffalino sort of oversaw what was going on with the Genoveses until they were able to figure out how to push Tommy Eboli kind of out of the way. And that's sort of the way that it went. When Lombardo retires in 1981, Salerno becomes the front boss for Vinny Gigante. And that position would eventually lead to the commission case where Salerno would be sentenced to 100 years for being boss of an organized crime family, which he really wasn't. And we're going to go into some evidence of that as well. It's also well known at the time that Tony Salerno, like I said, was the front boss. And in fact, Al Diarco, who later became boss of the Lucchese's before becoming a fucking rat, told investigators when he was officially made in 1982, he was told that Vincent the Chin Gigante was boss. So you have Al Diarco telling the FBI, Tony Salerno's not the boss. Vinny Gigante's the boss. That's the first thing. February 25th, 1985, Salerno and 8 other New York mob bosses were arrested and indicted in the Mafia Commission trial. The trial begins in September of 86 and lasts 3 months. In October of that year, Fortune magazine named Salerno the top gangster in power and influence, which didn't help his case against the government. Ultimately, Salerno would be convicted in November of that year and sentenced to 100 years in prison. While awaiting trial, he was also indicted on a racketeering indictment. The indictment would go on to show the levels of sophistication and intelligence that Salerno possessed. The indictment accused Salerno of infiltrating the concrete companies to control the construction of Mount Sinai School of Medicine, the Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, and a dozen of Manhattan's high-rise projects. And so this is what the Concrete Club sort of becomes. So Salerno's base of operations is essentially in Harlem, and he's all over the place. So in other words, basically, if you poured concrete in the city or you had a construction project anywhere in the city, Salerno got a huge kickback, monster kickback. And eventually the Gambinos and the other bosses sort of move in and they all get a huge fistful of cash from the honeypot, so to speak. Salerno is also accused of illegally aiding in the election of Roy Lee Williams to the national presidency of the Teamsters Union. Salerno would plead not guilty. He would end up being convicted for that and sentenced to another 70 years on top of his 100. But perhaps the biggest thing that Salerno is wrongly convicted in the commission case. An FBI picked up a conversation between Matty the Horse Ianello and Tony Salerno, and they were discussing a prospective list of made guys in another crime family. Salerno was sort of frustrated because the list didn't include nicknames. Salerno really had no clue who these guys were, and he's literally caught on a wiretap saying, I don't know who the fuck any of these guys are. I'll just leave it up to the boss, which is more proof that Gigante, not Salerno, was actually in charge of the family. Salerno would ultimately be sentenced in the 2 trials to 170 years. He would end up dying in prison in 1992 while serving time in Springfield, Missouri. But the one thing that I really want to hit on, and I know this is a lot of information in a short period of time because I'm on a time crunch for the show length, is that this is a guy who would resort to violence. Like last resort, he would resort to violence, but he was able to hold on to his territory, expand everywhere else, and it was all about money. This guy was no joke. $400 million a year he's bringing into the family on his own. So he sort of becomes the front boss, gets indicted in the commission thing. The sad case is, and the same can be said of Carmine Persico. is that both of these guys, at the time they get indicted, were not official bosses of a family. There was a lot of information that the FBI knew, and I don't know specifically if they buried it or they just didn't acknowledge it. I think when you get Tony Salerno on a wiretap saying, I don't know who the fuck these guys' names are, I don't know who from who, just let the boss handle it, it's not my problem. That should be proof enough he's not in control. And then you get Al DiArco telling the FBI that the guy's not in control. And then you have other informants that came along that all said the same thing, that Tony Salerno's not the boss of this family. And so that's an issue. It's the same thing that sort of happened to Persico, a little bit different of a situation, but very much to the same respect. Tony Salerno gets 170 years in prison for being something that he's not. First of all, getting 70 years in prison for racketeering with no murders attached to it, a little crazy to me. Bid rigging and et cetera, et cetera. It's insanity to me. Getting 100 years for being a boss of a family you're not a boss of. He could have bitched, he could have complained, he could have said a lot of different things, but he didn't. Because Tony Salerno was old school. He refused to talk, and he wasn't about to open his mouth and say, "Nah, I'm not the boss, fucking the chin is. Are you fucking out of your mind? I'm not taking a 100-year pinch for this guy." But he didn't say anything. Took his medicine, went to prison. Probably... I see a lot of these things that pop up on Facebook all the time, but this guy was the biggest earner of the mafia ever. I don't think anybody comes. Michael Francis loves to claim that, which is hilarious. But I honestly think if you're going to break it down into guys that were on a whole nother level of intelligence, a whole nother level of being secret, for the most part, and a whole nother level of bringing in billions of dollars to an organized crime family is Tony Salerno. You're going to be hard-pressed to find me anybody that can top him. Francis couldn't hold his jock for a second. Just what he was able to accomplish in a relatively short period of time, and being a captain in a crime family at a relatively young age and living through some of the crazy shit that happened. And be relatively, for most of his life. I mean, think about it. He was in his late 70s when he went to prison. Or maybe even 80s. I think it's 70s. But to go unscathed from your teens all the way until your 70s is an incredible fucking run. You just don't see that very often. And just the sheer amount of money that he made, and just being a politician about things, knowing the right moves to make and when, being cognizant of construction projects that you need to take because you understand the wealth involved. It's not as simple as saying, they're building this, I want a kickback. It was designed. The fact that in his 20s he's got 200 people working under him on in the numbers racket is just insane. And so I for the life of me, I can't think of anybody else who was as powerful as this guy was at a relatively young age and who made money like nobody's fucking business. Like nobody's business. And then he never said a word. He took it on the chin, did what he had to do, and that's life. And I think you're going to be really hard-pressed to find a guy that made that kind of money that didn't tell on anybody and minded his business. And for the most part, with the exception of maybe a handful of incidents, gets caught on a wiretap. And then when those wiretaps sort of lend itself to the credence that you're not who the FBI says you are, where's the... I think I'm looking... The word I'm looking for, and I don't want to use the Merlino trial as like an evidence for this, but if the FBI is lying or they're withholding the information, at what point does the FBI not become criminals themselves? And this is sort of going to flip me on a tangent of something Joey said. Trump, he mentioned Donald Trump coming out of court. He said something about, we ought to outlaw the flippers. And maybe he's got a point. And I understand the argument is if you don't have people that are going to tell, you can't get a conspiracy charge. I totally get it. But I think a conspiracy charge ought to be fucking unlawful itself. The idea and the way to commonly explain this is, well, if a bunch of people are doing something and you know about it, you don't tell on them, you're guilty of it too. Maybe I'm just minding my fucking business. If somebody on the street, some nut job, some wackadoodle, just got out of Bellevue, comes up to me in a cracked out frame of mind and says, I'm going to kill 16 fucking people, and I don't really take him seriously, and he does it, I can go to prison for that? Like, are you fucking kidding me? Now, that's not a conspiracy charge, but I'm just saying this is the way that the Justice Department works. And more importantly, the big issue is, and it's something that really fucking I'm passionate about, something that really angers me is, if you're accused of fucking murder and you're acquitted, how can that be used against you in court? It shouldn't be. You have Judge Sullivan, and I'm not going to go on a rant about Joey Merlino and this stuff again, but you have Judge Sullivan saying, I don't believe Joey Merlino's the head of anything. I don't even believe Joey Merlino was in charge of this fraud issue and really even that much involved. But then he's going to turn around 3 seconds fucking later and bring up everything he was ever acquitted of or everything he was ever accused of, any moniker he's ever been fucking called, and use that as evidence. That's not evidence. Just because you're accused of something doesn't fucking mean you did it. Then when 13 fucking jurors come back and say he didn't do it, this is ridiculous, how can you use that in a court of law to punish somebody? I get it. You're going to argue a character or somebody. I totally understand it. Use his convictions against him. Totally okay with that. That's reality. That happens in state court. But what state court doesn't do is bring up charges that you were acquitted of. The government, federal court, like my attorney says, the Fatico rule, they can do it. It should be illegal. It's prejudicial. It doesn't. It has no. It seems to me like it's double jeopardy to me. So let's say I'm 18 years old. They accuse me of a murder. I get acquitted. Let's say I go another 15 or 20 years. I don't have another charge. I get picked up on something else, and they bring that up in federal court. Like, come on. And I get it from the standpoint of the argument that Sullivan made. I understand his argument completely. Doesn't make it fucking valid. It sort of makes him a giant fucking hypocrite, especially when 85% of these other motherfuckers that were convicted in the same shit Joey was, or who pled out, I should say, like the situation Joey was in, got house arrest. But they used the murder accusations and the acquittals as evidence to lock him up for 2 fucking years. Once again, let's go back to Tony Salerno. Accusing him of being a boss, which has been publicly noted he wasn't. And they throw him in the can the rest of his life. Carmine Persco, same exact deal. He was not official boss at the time he was convicted. There was wiretaps picked up where they were talking about that. Yet the judges don't seem to get it. Look, I get it. The government has a blank checkbook. They can keep going after everybody and do whatever the fuck they want. They fabricate witnesses. They fabricate information. But at some point, I think as a society, evidence should convict you. Not the words of somebody who's a scumbag lying fuck, who's been a proven lying scumbag fuck. Because it's become sort of this thing, and it's always been that way, and it's probably never going to change. So I'm kind of harping on a dead subject. But at some point, the government has to say, okay, this is the witness we're going to bring forward in a conspiracy racketeering charge. But when the defense brings up he beats women, he's a junkie, 99 of 104 days, or whatever the fuck it was, he was unchecked, he deleted half the messages, didn't corroborate evidence, misplaced this, misplaced that. At what point does a judge have to say, all right, the jury had a mistrial on these charges, so rather than me even bring this bullshit up because we're dealing with a gambling charge or whatever the fuck it might be, I'm really not going to take what this asshole has to say into consideration because he's been proved to be not a truth teller. If you got a videotape of somebody doing something, DNA, okay, done deal, got it. Can't really argue your way out of that. When you bring these people forward that are like have almost more atrocious pasts than the guy you're accusing, there's something wrong. There's something wrong, and it's not right. And I don't know what the perfect solution to that would be, but I think the government has to stop relying on fucking rats. And I understand it. It's never going to change. It's always going to be that way. But it's not right. You're going to hammer a guy for 2 years for a gambling charge. Get the fuck out of here. Come on, gambling. I bet you anything. You think the judge doesn't gamble? Please. Everybody gambles in some form, fashion, or another. You go to the corner and buy a fucking dollar scratcher. What the fuck you think that is? Gambling. The only reason why it's legitimized is because the government gets a kickback off of it. That's it. Same thing with the lottery. That's numbers racket. That's all it is. It's legalized numbers racket. The government gets a fucking kickback. That's why I would have loved, and I said this, and I'm going to close with this. I would have loved for Joey to stand up and say, you know what, Your Honor, all right, so I took $2,500 in cash. Here's what I figured the tax would be. Here's a check. Government gets their end. Where's the problem then? Because really, isn't that all that it is? Because what other reason would the government waste fucking 6 months of their time prosecuting somebody for fucking gambling? It's ridiculous, especially when all the casinos are legalizing sports gambling. It's a bullshit charge. Joey got twice the time he should have. But the reason why that happened is because of past acquittals. And that's fucking ridiculous. It's the same thing of if you're acquitted in a murder charge, then the family could sue you in court for being culpable. If I'm fucking acquitted and a jury of my peers says there's no evidence to say that I did this, how the fuck can you sue me for wrongful death? It's retarded to me. I don't understand it. Maybe I never will. All right, so all that being said, that's the show. Next week, we're going to do a big Q&A. We're going to talk about the Mafia cops, Louis Ippolito, Stephen Caracappa with a little gas pipe on the side. You can reach out to us on Twitter at RealMobTalk7, Facebook, Mob Talk Radio. Check us out on YouTube, www.youtube.com/C/MobTalkRadio. I know some of the comments have been disabled, and it's not like I'm doing that intentionally. It's just I keep forgetting to click the goddamn button. All that being said, we'll be back next week with a brand new show. I will be probably taking the weekend of November 1st through the 3rd off. You will not get a show. If you do, it'll probably be the following Wednesday. I got things going on. If you're going to be in Rhode Island November 2nd, please check out the John Gotti III fight. It's going to be a great fight. Tickets are almost sold out from what I understand. So get your tickets. Come on out to Lincoln, Rhode Island and Twin River and see the fight. It's going to be a great event. What else is going on? I think that's just about it. Send your threats. Lord knows I'm getting those. Your hatred. Lord knows I'm getting that. Comments or concerns or anything you might have, you know where to send them. And I wanted to thank everybody for listening. And we'll be back next week with an all-new show.